In 2026, The Witcher 3 is more than 11 years old. We have played it, we have finished it, we have watched Geralt's story unfold more times than we can count. And at this point, most of us know how to make the game as efficient as possible. We know where the signposts are, we know which quests to prioritize, we know which merchants are worth visiting, and the second a quest sends us somewhere far, we fast travel. But what if you stop? Not for an hour, not as some challenge run, but for an entire playthrough. Because when you remove fast travel from the Witcher 3, you're not simply making the transportation slower, you're changing the way the story is told. And in 2026, I think that's one of the most interesting ways to experience this game. There's something strange about replaying The Witcher 3 after all these years. The first time you play it, the world feels enormous. Every road seems to lead somewhere. Every village has a story. Every question mark on the map feels like a potential adventure. But eventually, you learn the system. You stop wandering. You start optimizing. A quest objective, finding the nearest signpost and teleport. After you've completed the objective, teleport again. And suddenly, this enormous open world becomes a series of destinations. That's convenient, but it also creates a problem. The game starts becoming about where you're going instead of what happens along the way. And that matters because CD Projekt Red specifically built The Witcher 3 around the idea that the spaces between locations should contain meaningful experiences. In a 2015 interview, members of the development team explained that if the wilderness felt empty, players would simply fast travel. Their solution was to fill those spaces with encounters, wildlife, viewpoints, points of interest, and side quests. In other words, the road isn't filler, the road is part of the design. The first thing that disappears when you fast travel everywhere is distance. And distance is important. Think about Geralt traveling from one settlement to another. On the map, it's just a line. We are at a point in the world. The objective is there. Then you click a button. And then after a load screen, you have arrived near your objective. But when you actually write the distance, something changes. Velen feels enormous. Novigrad feels farther away. And a tiny village suddenly feels isolated. A random castle feels like somewhere you had actually to reach. The world gains geography, and that's something fast travel destroys almost instantly. The developers designed the main open world areas so players could wander through them without constantly needing to load into separate spaces. That means the game is constantly capable of connecting one experience to another. A village leads to a road leads to a forest leads to ruins, the ruins leads to a monster encounter, and that monster encounter may lead to something entirely different. When you first travel, you cut all of those connections. This is where things get really interesting because The Witcher 3 has two different kinds of narrative. There's the narrative you're given, and then there's the narrative you discover. The first one is obvious. You follow the quest, Geralt talks to someone, investigate, you might fight something, or you might make a decision, and the story continues. But the second kind happens when you're simply traveling. You hear people talking, you see someone being attacked, you might stumble upon a ruined settlement, you might find a monster nest, or you might discover hidden treasures. You might notice something in the distance. These moments aren't necessarily part of your main objective, they are incidental narratives, and that's what makes them feel so natural. You're not being told, here's the next story. You're simply encountering something that exists in Geralt's world. That's an enormous difference. When I first travel constantly, I find myself playing the quest log. And I personally don't think I'm the only one who completed the game this way. I think most of us did it. You open your journal, you pick an objective, you look at the map, and you find the nearest signpost. Then you travel to the nearest signpost and you fast travel. You will repeat this multiple times. Now, the game becomes incredibly efficient, but efficiency isn't always immersion. Without fast travel, that behavior starts to break down. You simply can't jump from one objective to another objective. You have to move through the world. And that forces you to accept something modern open world games often train us to avoid: downtime. You don't have to always have something happening. Sometimes you're just riding. And at first, that feels like wasted time. Then something strange happens. You stop thinking about the destination and you start paying attention to the journey that you are taking. And then there is Roach. And let's be honest, Roach deserves better. When you first travel constantly, Roach can start feeling like a glorified vehicle that you can summon whenever you need to cross a field or reach to the nearest signpost or to the nearest objective. But when you stop fast traveling, Roach becomes part of your adventure. You're riding through the forests, you're crossing muddy roads, you're climbing hills, you're passing through villages, you have long rides through Velen. Sometimes you're galloping through Novigrad, or you're crossing bridges at sunsets. And even sometimes, on some occasions, you might stop on a hill just because the view looked incredible. I started taking roads instead of cutting across the entire maps. It is surprisingly satisfying, and because Roach isn't the fastest horse in gaming history, the journey has just enough friction to make arriving somewhere feel like an accomplishment. This is probably my favorite part. Without fast travel, the game gets a chance to interrupt you. You're heading towards a quest, and then you see something. Then you decide you want to go and investigate it. When you go and investigate it, you might find monsters, and then you start fighting them. After the fight is done, you might discover a chest, or you might notice a nearby structure. Then you decide you're going to go investigate that. And suddenly, the quest you originally wanted to complete isn't even what you are thinking about anymore. That's the magic of a good open world. It changes your plans. And The Witcher 3 was deliberately built around this kind of density. The developers talked about wanting players to be rewarded for their curiosity with experiences that aren't necessarily marked on the map. This is why riding around can produce moments that feel more authentic than following a carefully optimized quest route. You didn't choose the story, the world gave you one. There's another start to change. Your relationship with Geralt's journey starts to change. There's something about this that particularly works well for Geralt. He's a wandering monster hunter. He's constantly moving, even is following rumors, or maybe tracking monsters down. Even he may be traveling in between settlements. And sometimes he may be searching for people. So, when you actually spend time on the road, Geralt feels more like Geralt. You're not magically appearing whenever the objective happens to be. You are traveling there. You stop at a village, you pass a group of soldiers, you might encounter something strange, and then you continue. And eventually, you arrive where you had intended to go from the beginning. That makes the world feel more connected. The story doesn't just happen at quest locations, it happens between them. And because Geralt isn't just a character completing missions, he's a monster hunter traveling from place to place. And you're supposed to feel that. There's also something cinematic about traveling on horseback. You leave a town, the music fades, the road stretches ahead, the weather might change, and then you ride through a forest, it starts going down, and it may start raining. And suddenly, you're not rushing towards the next objective. You are simply there. This is especially effective in The Witcher because its environments are designed to be experienced at the ground level. The developers have described the importance of making the spaces between settlements work, including landscapes, encounters, wildlife, and locations that players might discover naturally. And honestly, you can feel that design philosophy. The world doesn't constantly need to entertain you. It just needs to make you curious enough to move from one point to another. And here's why I think this is worth trying specifically in 2026. We have spent years playing open world games that make movement almost frictionless. You can fast travel, you can use gliders or vehicles or any mode of transportation. You can even teleport. You have quest markers and GPS plastered on your UI. Everything is designed to get you to the content. But The Witcher 3 is interesting because so much of its content is already in the journey. Even today, players are experimenting with limited fast travel and no fast travel setups, including mods specifically designed to disable ordinary fast travel and force travel and you're forced to travel through the world. And the continued interest makes sense because removing fast travel isn't necessarily about making the game harder, it's about making the game world difficult to ignore. Now, here is another important fact, or the most important fact that I may say. I'm not saying fast travel is bad. It isn't. There are moments when it makes perfect sense. When you might have explored an area, or you might have completed everything in that area, or when you have a ridiculous amount of loot on you and you want to offload it. A quest might send you across the map for the fifth time, and you might not want to experience that again. You can use the signpost. No one is going to arrest you. And there are places where long distance travel is deliberately obstructed because the distance would simply be unreasonable. Like the different parts of the world, like the continents. The developers themselves explained that certain locations, such as the Skellige Islands, require fast travel because traveling the full distance by boat will take too long to be practical. The point is, never fast travel. The point is, don't fast travel automatically. If the journey looks interesting, take it. Eventually, something will click. You will stop measuring the game by how many quests you have completed. You will start measuring it by the things you have experienced. You will remember the strange encounters on the road. You will remember some of the abandoned villages that you might have traveled to or you might have seen. You will remember monsters you weren't expecting to find on the road. Sometimes you will remember the beautiful views, some random NPCs, or the treasures you found by accident. None of these moments necessarily appear in the main story, but you will remember them. And that's what makes an open world feel alive. A world doesn't feel real because it has a massive map. It feels real because things happen when you're not looking for them. So, if you're starting The Witcher 3 again in 2026, try something different. Don't delete fast travel. Don't install a hardcore survival mode. Just stop using the signposts by default. When a quest sends you somewhere nearby, right there. When you finish a quest, don't immediately teleport to the next objective. Look around, take the road, see what happens. Because you might discover a quest. You might find a monster. You might stumble across something completely unexpected. Or maybe, just maybe, nothing will happen. And that's okay too, because sometimes Geralt is just riding through the lane. The world is quiet, the music is playing, the destination is somewhere in the distance. And for once, you're not trying to get there as quickly as possible. You're simply traveling. And after all these years, that's what has made me realize something. Fast travel doesn't just keep the road. Sometimes it keeps important bits of the story.